and I will hand over to Tony now. So Tony is in, I think you're in the Department of Management in the school, in the College of Lincoln's International Business School. Really interesting to hear about your conversations, lessons from the digital Chalkface. Absolutely pertinent to today's presentation. So, with no further chat from me, I'll hand over to you.
Hi, Andy. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I'm Tony Clark, and I'm a member of the Lincoln International Business School. And welcome to the session on lessons from the digital Chalkface. So this is hopefully a very short, honest practitioner view of some of the challenges that we faced in a particular arena and how we dealt with them. So I'm the program leader for an MSc in Logistics Management, which is delivered under contract to the Ministry of Defence and wrapped up into a wider training program called the Defence Logistics Staff Course. So if I just start with my quote on the screen, and this is from one of our tutors in March 2020, and it's quite pertinent because it's that anniversary as we speak. So when we went into initial lockdown, we were actually teaching on a residential course on a military camp. So it became very apparent to us, the students we were with, the military partners as well, that this was going to be very different and a little bit of a challenge. And I guess the quote there emphasises the uniqueness and nervousness that we felt as a team with all the other partners around us about what the future may look like for our learning and our programme. So a little bit of context, please. So we deliver this course under contract to the Ministry of Defence. We normally do it in a residential week, and it's traditionally face-to-face with 2.5 days of academic from the university and 2.5 days of military speakers that tie the topic together under this remit of the wider Defence Logistics Staff Course. Our cohorts are professional students, so they tend to be senior managers in the Ministry of Defence. Now that's really good and that's very rewarding, but also a little bit of a challenge for us in terms of they know what they want, they have high expectations. So what we do often try to do is bring them very much into the fore in terms of getting their experiences and sharing that and offering a translation from the practitioner viewpoint into the academic viewpoint. As I say, it's delivered under contract. Now that's reasonably important for us because unlike normal face-to-face delivery in a university, we've also got that third party. So we've got the military partners to consider as well as the students. So that offers many streams of thought, which we have to coordinate into a single view. Clearly, there's some elements of compliance as well. And that allows me to jump onto the second half of the screen here. And this is a Qualtrics report. So every one of the lessons that we deliver to the military are reviewed by the students, and their review is captured in an independent survey run by Defence. So that I put this on the screen to show really that we are monitored reasonably closely, but what we've had in pre-pandemic times, that we get really good feedback. So it's good and excellent as the majority of viewpoints there. So what that really means to us is that we've got a reasonable pedagogy which ensures that we're delivering what we're supposed to do. But of course, that then became a challenge when we moved online. So that's what I really wanted to focus on today, was how we moved from the face-to-face to the online. So perhaps there's some lessons to be learned. The first one was don't panic. So immediately we realized that we were going to change into a very different environment. And that panic wasn't just associated with the teaching team, it was with the university, it was with the military partners, and indeed the students themselves. So we had to come up with a stable position of what we wanted to do and how we would achieve it. So our first point of call was to go to the university. And you'll recall in whatever educational institution you're in, there was probably a lot of noise at the time about how we translated from face-to-face into that online learning. Now, that was partly useful and partly not useful. Certainly, there was a lot of noise going on about what that may look like. And the example that I might offer is Padlet as a tool to use was very useful to us, and it was being talked about a lot. But when we came to actually sort of use it as a tool, we found we never had access from the university's perspective. So we were lucky enough to have our own budget, so we brought our own Padlet access. But I guess that's the point I'm making, is that noise was useful in terms of setting the scene, but we needed some practical support as well. So what we decided to do was stick to what we know. So we knew we were reasonably good at our pedagogy, which is basically student engagement, student as practitioners, activity-based learning, problem solving, and getting feedback from the students. So our consideration is, how can we do that online? Another issue that we had to think about is we had groups of students. We had students that were with us for a long time, so we had to convert them to online, and we had new students joining us that were not experienced to face-to-face, so we could almost take a unique approach with them. But also in the background, we had the military partners saying, we will return to a classroom environment. So all of those put together offered us a position of, what are we going to do? So we are logisticians, so we decided to fall back on what we know. So here's a model of the 7 R's of logistics: right product, right place, for example. So we use that as a planning tool of how we might deliver our program. So we looked at the right product. So this was our new online delivery. What would that actually look like? That enabled us to view our customers. So we saw that very much as the student cohorts, but in a military context around the world, with all the challenges that they're facing in terms of access to internet, etc. The right time and place offered a really good challenge for us in terms of mediums and platforms. We opted for Blackboard Collaborate, but we knew that didn't work with the Ministry of Defence computers. We couldn't join the Ministry of Defence Teams meetings. So that offered a challenge in terms of the medium that we would adopt. And we eventually opted for Blackboard Collaborate, and that's worked really well. And then there's the right condition and right quantity. So the idea of, when are we going to deliver it? What does that session look like? And the quality of the delivery that we offer. And because we're a contractual agreement as well, there's cost was involved. We had to make sure that what we were doing still met the budgetary requirements and the aspirations. So that gave us this viewpoint across here of, what does that mean for us? Well, I've explained the Padlet idea, lots of noise and information, but not many practical tips. So we decided to say, well, we know what we're good at, let's keep to the pedagogy. And then decided to think, well, what tools and techniques are available to us so that we can deliver what we know? And that's what we fell back on. And then we adopted our own practice. And that's practice as in the way we deliver things, but also practice as in how we actually prepared ourselves. So we did spend a lot of time as a group working together to create ideas and concepts. What does that look on the screen for you? What doesn't it look on the screen for you? And that's where we came to some core ideas of Blackboard, shared rooms, and indeed Padlet. And we shared those experiences across the group. But also, as the program leader, I've got to say I was a little bit forceful at times, saying, this is where we're going to be, these are the contractual arrangements, this is what it's going to look like in the future. So we did a share best practice, but there was a central theme of coordinating all of those voices together to make sure we achieved what we wanted to achieve in the best possible structure. So that led us to lead on to a position of, well, what is it that we want to achieve and how have we done it? So we adopted these are the key interactions, but what we first thought about was giving people technical confidence. Now, for example, we've had many mature students that weren't particularly tech savvy, and that's a phrase that they used. And indeed, we would probably say that for some of our tutors as well. So it did make us think, what's the most safe environment in terms of creating a technical virtual learning environment in which our students could engage with us. But also away from the technology safe zone, it was the idea of, I want to be able to speak out. I want to be able to get my messages across. I don't want to be, I want to build up the community of learners. So that drove us in some of the activities that we adopted. And as I've referred to already, there's the tools and techniques that we looked at in terms of developing these to support our pedagogy. And then what we wanted to do is embed communications into the program to allow our students to have their voice. And although it was quite basic in Blackboard, hands up, speech bubble, and indeed the thumbs up was a really useful way of controlling the group and bringing the group along with you and making sure we shared the information. And of course, we were lucky enough to have external communications in terms of they're in their own organisation and their own community already. So defence was quite useful in sharing that communications as well. So the key takeaways for me would be, it works and it does work well. And we've had some really positive feedback from our students, but it was seen as a temporary measure. We've now been doing it for a year. So the expectations of our students are getting a little higher each time. So we do need to think about our pedagogy again and the tools and techniques that we're using. The physical location is important. I think I've got a minute left. Physical location is important. Some things are beyond our control, and that's the bandwidth, for example. There's nothing we can really do about it, and that's a challenge. And the MOD now are so pleased with the progress that we've made, are actually looking at, should we now move the course from being face-to-face to online provision? So it's really offered some challenges and opportunities, such as cost saving and expanding the programme. So I think that puts me just about on time, so I'll be quiet at this point.
Thank you, Tony. Really interesting. I'd encourage you, if you have any questions, to post them into the chat. But whilst we're waiting for those questions, I just wanted to ask, you mentioned student expectations. I think that's a theme that's coming up quite a lot currently. And the MOD's expectations have changed over the last 12 months. So is there any reflections on it? What do you know, with the increasing demands from students, what do you think they'll be looking for going forward? And how do we meet those expectations?
I think it's a really interesting position. I think for us, and the survey results hasn't come back from Defence yet, but they've asked the question of the student cohorts whether they'd like to stay online or go back to face-to-face. And there is, I've got to say, there's a roughly 50-50 split. Students really like the face-to-face, the interaction, the contribution, and some of the informal learning as well. The fact that they can speak to each other over a cup of coffee, that's seen as a very positive. But if we could embed that into the new programmes, then face-to-face, online delivery will be quite good. And I think the real challenge for us is to get to the point where people understand body language. There's an informal space where they can engage and speak with each other. I'm not sure if that answered the question, but was that okay?
Yeah, no, it's great. So it just made me reflect. I mean, is the conversation now shifting away from how do we integrate digital into the face-to-face sessions when we talk about blending, and actually moving more towards how do we integrate the face-to-face sessions into a digital environment when you think about blended learning?
I think you're probably right. The advantage that we've always had with face-to-face is they're on a residential week, so they share a cup of tea, they go to lunch together. And often I think we've underestimated how much learning takes place in those informal environments. So I might have a cup of tea and sit next to somebody, and then we have a more detailed conversation about the point that they really want to raise and dig into. I think getting into that learning environment, moving away from the formal learning environment into that informal chat residential space, it will be a challenge, and I'm not quite sure how it will be addressed. But I think it's something that's come to the fore in terms of the wider process of how we learn and teach.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. Plenty to think about that. Is there any final questions anyone wants to ask? Helen? The informal learning social contact aspect of face-to-face is the part that my part-time postgrad healthcare professional students miss. The digital learning otherwise works well in terms of flexibility for working people. I agree with Tony on how important it is. I think, yeah, it's more of a statement than a question. But any final points you'd like to reflect upon there, Tony?
What I really want to do is make this point. We are delivering online. Students are finding it useful. It is working, but there is a but. And I'm not quite sure if the students themselves, the military partners, or indeed us, know what that but is. But I know we're moving to a different learning space and a learning environment, and people are embracing technology and digital learning and new ways of doing things. That would be my concluding point.
No, that's really, really interesting. And I think a good point to finish. Thank you very much, Tony.